He spotted it the moment it hit the auction table. The mourning ring Queen Elizabeth wore after Prince Philip died, but it wasn't in a museum. It wasn't under glass. It was being sold for money by Queen Camilla's son at an event she hosted, with cameras rolling, and the man guarding them wasn't just ceremonial. He went undercover, baited them into exposing everything, and by the end of the week, Camilla and her son were exiled from the royal family forever. Before we show you how Prince William reacted when he saw what they were selling, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Because this wasn't just a sale, it was a betrayal of blood, and one guard didn't let it go unpunished. The chandeliers inside Lancaster House glittered like something out of another century, crystal arms refracting light across a ballroom packed with ambassadors, aristocrats, and society's most polished collectors. Below them, a string quartet murmured through subdued waltzes, while champagne glasses clinked softly, and auction catalogues fluttered in manicured hands. The scent of roses and expensive perfume hung thick in the air, mingling with the faint smell of old wood and wax. The evening's banner, embroidered in gold thread above the main archway, read, "Restoring Royal Heritage, a charity auction under the patronage of Her Majesty the Queen Consort." Sergeant Rowan Kellan stood against the far wall in full formal attire, ceremonial sabre at his side, every button polished to a mirror. Coldstream Guard for 13 years, now rotated into private security detail for select royal functions. Tonight, his presence was meant to be purely symbolic, a uniformed silhouette to assure donors that crown traditions still stood tall behind the velvet rope. He watched without watching, eyes sweeping the room every 8 seconds, hands still, posture straight. In a world where protocol was performance, Rowan's job was to notice what wasn't scripted. At the podium, Thomas Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's son, adjusted his cufflinks and smiled into the crowd. His voice, warm and familiar, echoed over the speaker with practiced ease. "This next item," he said, lifting a velvet-lined case, "is a rare piece of private remembrance. A mourning ring, platinum set, believed to date back to the early reign of Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Rowan's gaze shifted, not abruptly. Surgical. He saw it, and everything in him stopped moving. The ring was small, understated, a narrow platinum band engraved with looping cursive, too delicate for most to read from a distance. But Rowan didn't need the zoomed projection or the auctioneer's flattery. He'd seen that ring before, 2 years ago, in a locked archival chest at Windsor Castle. He'd helped document it during the Queen's private estate transfer. The engraving inside the band, Philip Ever E, was unmistakable. It wasn't ceremonial, it wasn't museum-bound, it was personal, it was irreplaceable, and it had never been listed for release. Rowan remained motionless, but something beneath his collar tightened. His pulse didn't quicken, it steadied, the kind of calm that came before action, not panic. On stage, the crowd responded with restrained awe. The starting bid was announced. A hand went up from a French antiques dealer, another from a discreetly dressed man with a Middle Eastern accent. The price climbed quickly, 20,000, 40, 60. Rowan didn't blink. When the hammer finally fell at £72,000, applause fluttered politely through the room. Thomas closed the case with a casual flourish, then passed it to an aide to be boxed for transfer. Rowan's fingers, hidden behind his back, tapped a subtle rhythm against his belt. 3 quick knocks, code for "I've seen enough." He shifted his weight slightly, hand grazing the secure device holstered beneath his coat. In that moment, he wasn't a ceremonial figure. He was the last line between reverence and robbery, and somewhere behind the champagne smiles and applause, he knew exactly what he'd just witnessed. They were selling the Queen, piece by piece, and he wasn't going to let it happen again. Rowan moved with practiced stillness as the crowd drifted toward the sidebar, and Camilla began greeting donors near the portrait gallery entrance. The atmosphere buzzed with flattery and light orchestration, but behind Rowan's eyes, the room was already quiet, narrowed to a single question. Who gave them permission to sell that ring? He made his way toward the side exit with the air of a guard, simply adjusting his post. No one stopped him. No one even looked twice. Just another red tunic, moving through the walls like a shadow. Once alone in the side hallway, he stepped into a secure alcove near the kitchen, where signal jammers were weakest. From beneath his ceremonial coat, he unclipped a compact, encrypted tablet, the kind reserved for sovereign service use. His fingers moved fast. He searched the heritage registry first. Every royal artifact under crown lock since the Queen's passing. The ring came up instantly. Item number 142B. Personal property, non-transferable. Classification, intimate, private. Not to leave royal holdings. Rowan stared at the confirmation, jaw tight. The entry was still active, not listed as donated, reassigned, or declassified. And yet it had just been auctioned off for £72,000 under a velvet hammer. He pulled up the royal estate movement logs. No withdrawal, no authorization, no signature. Someone had moved it without record. He pocketed the tablet and re-entered the ballroom, posture calm, expression unreadable. As he stepped back into position near the rear column, he spotted Thomas Parker Bowles laughing with a Swiss buyer near the staircase. Camilla remained by the display case, sipping sparkling water and speaking to a duke about land endowments. They looked untouched, unbothered, because they'd done this before. Rowan waited for the crowd to shift again, then moved in a slow arc toward the ring's display stand. His eyes caught the buyer's claim slip resting atop a glass podium, the lot number, price and buyer code handwritten in dark ink. With one smooth motion, Rowan adjusted a vase next to the slip and palmed a photo using his concealed index cam. Click, click. 2 silent shots, the item tag and the buyer's code. Enough to match to bank record later. He stepped back, nodding slightly to the valet across the room. Another silent code. Proceed as if nothing happened. He had everything he needed to begin. But one detail lingered, sharp and cold in the back of his mind. Thomas had listed the item provenance as private donation from Clarence House, which meant it wasn't a rogue staffer. It wasn't misfiled. It was intentional. The Queen's mourning ring had been sold, with her son's name on the transfer slip, under Camilla's event, surrounded by applause. Rowan didn't raise an alarm, didn't whisper a word to the other guards. Because this wasn't a problem for security. This was a betrayal wrapped in velvet, and he would need something far stronger than suspicion to bring it all down. He would need evidence, the kind you didn't find in palace files, the kind you caught in the act. The next 3 days passed with the tempo of a tightening snare. Sergeant Rowan Kellan submitted no formal report, raised no concerns through protocol, and yet every hour of his off-duty time was spent inside the digital shadows of the monarchy, threading through databases, auction catalogue, offshore dealer ledgers, and shipping manifests that most guards didn't even know existed. It started with the buyer's slip. Using the coded registration, Rowan traced the payment funnel to a front organisation based in Liechtenstein, one known to work with discreet royal intermediaries. That same account had made 3 other major purchases in the last 6 months, each labelled as Legacy Estate Memorabilia. Each funneled through a London holding company whose director, when traced back, turned out to be a former aide to Thomas Parker Bowles. Rowan didn't need more than that, but he got it anyway. He pulled archived lists from similar heritage charity auctions over the past year. Camilla had hosted 4, each framed around noble-sounding restoration causes. Each had included 1 or 2 anonymous estate donations, the kind that slipped past scrutiny because no one wanted to question the Queen Consort's good intentions. One had listed a silver grooming set known to have belonged to Queen Mary. Another, a pair of handwritten Christmas cards from Queen Elizabeth to her father, dated 1939. But it was the 3rd auction that made Rowan's blood run cold. Among the listed items was something labelled simply as personal correspondence, circa 1990. No photo, no description. Just a lot number and a final sale price of $140,000. Rowan cross-referenced the date against the Royal Archives. August 1919. The month before Princess Diana died. He He pulled up the buyer information. Same Liechtenstein account, same silent transfer, but this time there was a shipping manifest attached, an oversight, probably from a junior logistics clerk who didn't know what they were handling. The item had been shipped to a private vault in Geneva, marked as sensitive historical material. Rowan leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. If they'd sold letters from that period, letters that might have contained Diana's thoughts, fears, or suspicions in her final weeks, then this wasn't just theft, it was erasure. He screenshotted everything, logged the connections, then kept digging, and in all cases the trail ended the same way, with a foreign broker and a silent buyer. But now Rowan knew it wasn't just heirlooms, it was history itself being sold off to the highest bidder. Rowan leaned back from the screen in his cramped flat, the late Queen's handwriting still glowing on his tablet. His tea had gone cold hours ago. The street outside was silent except for the occasional taxi rolling past. They were selling ghosts. Not just property, intimate pieces of history. Letters, rings, gifts passed through bloodlines. Items never meant to leave the family, let alone cross into private hands for profit. He knew what had to be done, but it couldn't come from him. If he went through internal channels, it would be redirected, sanitized, or buried under procedural review. What he needed was an identity that opened doors instead of closing them. He needed to become a buyer, a wealthy, foreign, discreet collector with an appetite for royal heritage. He turned to the encrypted contact index embedded in his service tablet and selected a single name from the Royal Security Intelligence Desk, someone he trusted, someone who owed him a favour from a quiet operation in Belfast 2 years back. Within 2 hours, the cover was arranged. Alias Mr. Clark, retired investor from Dubai with ties to private historical preservation groups. Account, live and active, seeded with traceable Crown-disbursed funds, earmarked for training simulation. Contact email sent to the auction house. Request for private acquisition of other unlisted royal heirlooms. Willing to pay above market. He waited. 24 hours later, the reply came. Delighted to hear of your interest, Mr. Clark. We may have several items of sentimental significance that could be of interest to you. Private viewing available this Friday. Clarence House. TPB. Rowan stared at the signature. They weren't just doing it, they were comfortable doing it, which meant they didn't think they could be touched. So he would touch them. Right in the centre of the one thing they thought was untouchable, the crown itself. And when he did, he wouldn't need accusations. He'd have the tape. The rain had stopped just before Rowan arrived at Clarence House. He stepped from the waiting car wearing a tailored navy coat, black gloves, and polished shoes. No sign of uniform, no hint of his true identity. In his hand was a thin leather folio with forged credentials. Mr. Clark, Heritage Preservation Trust, Dubai office. A discreet staffer met him at the south entrance and led him through a side corridor lined with oil portraits and silent cameras. The usual fanfare of royal reception was gone. No aids, no introductions, just the quiet shuffle of soles on polished floor and the heavy hush of private business. They didn't even ask for ID, because real buyers never got asked. They were expected. At the far end of the hall, the door to the red drawing room stood slightly ajar. Beyond it, 2 crates sat opened beneath the window, afternoon light spilling across velvet and gold. Thomas Parker Bowles turned at the sound of Rowan's approach. He wore an open collar, expensive blazer, and that particular brand of aristocratic ease that mistook discretion for immunity. Mr. Clark, he said, offering a dry smile. Pleasure. Rowan nodded with perfect neutrality. I appreciate the short notice. Not at all, Thomas said, waving him inside, and when someone expresses interest in the right sort of history, we tend to move quickly. He gestured toward the first crate. Pieces from what I like to call the forgotten collection. Not museum fare, of course, but personal, intimate. Rowan moved to the crate and looked down. Inside lay a locket, unmistakable in its design, the Queen's own. He remembered it being worn on the balcony of Buckingham Palace during her final trooping the colour. The chain was slightly tarnished now, but the enamel frame gleamed. and inside, through the glass window, rested a sepia photograph of King George VI. He didn't react, just nodded. "The chain's still intact?" Rowan asked casually. "Of course," Thomas said. "Everything's been kept in private drawers, out of the public ledger." Rowan turned to the second crate. There, resting atop folded cloth, was something even more intimate. A black leather diary, the pages frayed with age. Her Majesty's unmistakable script ran across the top page. 22 of April. Spoke with Philip in the garden after supper. He says I worry too much. Perhaps I do. Rowan closed the cover gently. His fingers lingered on the worn leather for just a moment, long enough to feel the weight of what he was holding. Not just paper, memory. Then Thomas stepped closer, eyes narrowing slightly. "You seem quite familiar with these pieces, Mr. Clark. Have you dealt in royal memorabilia before?" Rowan felt the shift immediately. The casual ease in Thomas's voice had sharpened into something more alert, more suspicious. He kept his expression neutral. "Only in appraisal contexts. I've consulted for museums in the Gulf region. They often acquire pieces from European estates." "Which museums?" Thomas asked, pulling out his phone like he might verify it. Rowan didn't hesitate. "The Louvre, Abu Dhabi, primarily, though most of my work is under non-disclosure. Clients prefer anonymity when dealing with sensitive acquisitions." Thomas stared at him for a long moment, too long. Then he smiled. "Of course. Discretion is everything in this business." But Rowan saw it, the flicker of doubt that hadn't been there before. Thomas was rattled, which meant he'd have to move faster than planned. "How do you handle provenance?" Rowan asked, redirecting. Thomas shrugged. "Discretion over paperwork. Mother signs off personally." There it was. Rowan didn't blink. He simply smiled as though reassured. "Would it be possible to secure these by Friday evening? I'd like to finalise before I leave for Abu Dhabi." "Of course," what Thomas replied, walking over to a small cabinet. "We could arrange a private signing at Lancaster again, if that suits." "It does," Rowan said. He stepped closer, glanced once more at the locket, and reached into his pocket, a small audio device with a live feed ticking silently to the Royal Intelligence Desk. Every word was already recorded. Thomas handed him a preliminary invoice on thick cream paper. Rowan glanced at it, folded it, and slipped it into his folio. "I'll see you Friday," he said. And as he stepped back into the corridor, boots clicking softly on marble, he didn't just feel certain. He felt ready. The ballroom at Lancaster House had been reset for discretion. No chandeliers this time, no guests. No champagne trays or string quartets filling the air with polite sound. Just a long, polished table at the centre of the hall, a series of chairs aligned neatly around it, and the soft buzz of concealed cameras humming behind ornamental sconces. Every angle covered, every sound captured. Rowan Kellan arrived first, still dressed as Mr. Clark, same navy coat, same leather folio, but this time his demeanour was sharper, purposeful, no longer gathering breadcrumbs. This was the confrontation. He approached the table and placed his folio down gently, glancing toward the archway to confirm placement. 3 royal security operatives stood out of sight in the adjacent room, each wired into the feed. Prince William had reviewed the entire plan 2 hours earlier. He was here now, not visible, but close enough to step in. The doors opened with a quiet groan. Thomas entered first, carrying a velvet-lined tray. His posture was relaxed, bordering on smug. Camilla followed seconds later, gloved hands folded around a clutch purse, lips tight but composed. She offered a half-smile. "Mr. Clark, we appreciate your promptness." Rowan stood. "Punctuality is a habit of mine, ma'am." Thomas set the tray on the table, unveiling the items: the mourning ring, the locket, and the diary. Beneath them, a prepared deed of transfer and an unsigned sales invoice. "No need to bore you with the history," Thomas said. "We're all here for the same reason." Rowan opened his folio calmly, but instead of banknotes, he removed a single leather-bound envelope. "Actually," he said, voice cool, "we are not." Camilla's brows twitched, just barely. Rowan turned the envelope over and slid it across the table. The seal bore the insignia of the Royal Heritage Enforcement Division. Thomas blinked. "What's this?" Rowan answered flatly. "A formal warrant under Heritage Breach Protocol, signed and countersigned by His Royal Highness Prince William." The silence that followed struck harder than a slap. Camilla's smile vanished. Thomas stared, throat clicking dryly as he reached for the document, and read the first line aloud. "Authorization of intervention. Unauthorized transfer of protected sovereign property." Camilla muttered. "You're not a buyer." Rowan looked her dead in the eye. "No, ma'am. I'm a soldier." He pressed a button on the inside of his coat. A soft chime echoed through the room. From behind the curtains, security emerged. 3 figures, then a 4th. Prince William stepped forward. No medals, no formal regalia, just a dark suit and a face carved in cold recognition. His voice didn't rise. "You sold her memory." And no one moved. Not Camilla, not Thomas. Because in that one sentence, the weight of everything they'd hidden came crashing down, and there was no place left to hide. Thomas looked like he might be sick. He stood behind the tray of stolen heirlooms, ring, locket, diary, frozen in place, colour draining from his face, as Prince William's words hung in the air like a sentence already passed. Camilla, for once, said nothing. Her posture remained upright, elegant even, but her eyes darted between the seal on the warrant and the quiet ferocity in William's voice. She didn't move to touch anything, didn't try to interrupt. The silence itself was damning. Rowan stepped forward, removing a small device from his coat. He set it gently on the table next to the diary. He pressed play. "Mother signs off personally. These aren't museum items, they're sentimental. No paperwork. Discretion over provenance." Thomas's voice played clearly, unmistakable in tone and cadence. The sound echoed in the vast empty ballroom. Camilla's expression didn't shift, but her fingers curled slightly against her clutch, the only sign of nerves breaking through the mask. William looked down at the ring, the mourning band engraved with Philip Ever E, resting atop the velvet tray. He reached forward and turned it once slowly until the inscription faced him. Then he looked up. "You knew this wasn't yours to sell," said, voice still calm. "You knew exactly what it was, and you went ahead anyway." Thomas stammered. It wasn't meant to be disrespect. These were surplus, unwanted, forgotten." "Unwanted," William repeated, his voice sharpening. "This was the ring she wore for 50 years. This was the diary she kept during her father's illness. You think they were forgotten?" Camilla stepped in then, not angry, strategic. They were being stored, unused, pieces with no future place in the public collection. "We thought—" William cut her off. "You didn't think. You calculated. You monetized the most personal pieces of her life, and you did it under the guise of charity." Rowan remained still, watching every shift in the room. Every word was being recorded, every movement logged. This wasn't just confrontation, it was documentation. Camilla took a step forward, heels clicking once against the marble. "You're overreacting. We made sure nothing of political consequence was touched. These were personal items. That's why no official paperwork was filed. It was private, family-led." William's eyes narrowed. "You used her name to fund your son's bank account. That's not family, that's theft." Rowan reached into his coat and pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. He placed it on the table with a heavy thud that echoed through the empty ballroom. 17 items, Rowan said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Sold across 4 auctions over 14 months. Total value, $847,000. He opened the folder, revealing page after page of transaction records, photographs, shipping manifests. Queen Mary's grooming set, sold for $63,000 to a private collector in Monaco. He flipped the page. Christmas cards from Queen Elizabeth to her father, King George VI, dated 1939, sold for $81,000 to an anonymous buyer in Switzerland. Another page. A platinum fountain pen engraved with the royal cipher. given to Her Majesty on her 21st birthday, sold for 47,000. He looked up at Camilla, and personal correspondence, dated August 1919, the month before Princess Diana died, sold for 140,000 to a vault in Geneva, contents unknown, location sealed. The room went deathly silent. William's face had gone pale. You sold Diana's letters. Camilla's composure finally cracked. Those were never authenticated. They were purchased, Rowan interrupted, by the same shell company that bought everything else, and you signed the approval. He pulled out a final document, a handwritten authorization bearing Camilla's signature and the Clarence House seal. Thomas's voice cracked. You don't understand the pressure we're under, Rowan's tone cut in, steel wrapped in protocol. Pressure doesn't authorize betrayal. Thomas snapped, sudden and defensive. You're a guard. What would you know about legacy? Rowan didn't blink. Enough to know what isn't yours. William straightened, eyes locked on Camilla. This ends here. Right now. Every item returned, every account frozen, and every title revoked. Camilla's mouth opened, but no words came. He stepped back, glancing toward the door. Anne and the Lord Chamberlain will be here shortly. The tribunal begins tonight. He turned to Rowan. Seal the items. Secure the room. Rowan nodded once, then began closing the velvet cases, one by one, like closing them on a coffin. Not for a person, but for a lie that had finally reached its end. The chamber felt colder when Princess Anne entered. She wore no jewels, no ceremonial sash, only a charcoal suit and a look that could split stone. The Lord Chamberlain followed behind her, legal documents in hand, expression unreadable. Neither acknowledged Camilla nor Thomas as they took their seats at the long oak table, now cleared of all auction materials. Prince William remained standing. Rowan stood at attention against the far wall, arms behind his back, watching not as a soldier, but as the silent witness to the monarchy's reckoning with itself. Anne broke the silence. Before us lie 17 items verified as private possessions of the late Queen Elizabeth II, she said crisply, her voice clear and absolute. None of which were authorized for public sale, donation, or disposal. Each bears archival significance, familial attachment, or sovereign classification. Camilla remained still. Thomas looked like he hadn't breathed in minutes. Anne continued. Their attempted sale was conducted under a false pretext of charity, managed through unregistered intermediaries, and approved by members of this family with full knowledge of their origin. She turned to William. Do you wish to speak before the decree is entered? William stepped forward. He glanced once at Rowan, then down at the sealed box containing the mourning ring. I remember the first time I saw that ring, he said softly. It was the morning after my grandfather died. She wore it on her thumb for weeks, never spoke about it, never took it off. He paused, jaw tightening. The diary you sold. She kept it during the war. I found her reading it once, years ago, when I was a boy. She told me it reminded her that even queens were daughters first. His voice dropped lower. The locket with my great-grandfather's photograph? She wore it the day she buried my mother. I saw it under her collar during the funeral. She thought no one noticed, but I did. He looked up at Camilla, eyes red but dry. You didn't just sell objects. You sold the pieces of her she kept for herself. The things she held when no one was watching. The things that made her human. Camilla opened her mouth, but nothing came out. William turned to the Lord Chamberlain. Read the decree. He looked up. She trusted us to protect her story, not edit it, not auction it, protect it. He nodded to the Lord Chamberlain. The man unrolled a single sheet of parchment, the royal decree. The ink was fresh. The seal of the sovereign office pressed firm in crimson wax. In accordance with Sovereign Heritage Protocol and under emergency powers delegated for protection of Crown legacy, he read, voice steady and final. Her Royal Highness Camilla and Mr. Thomas Parker Bowles are hereby stripped of ceremonial privileges, removed from all positions of royal patronage, and formally exiled from participation in any future royal engagements, residencies, or representations. The words hit like a drumbeat through stone. Camilla's jaw tightened. You're exiling your own family? Anne answered before William could. You exiled yourself the moment you sold hers. Thomas finally spoke, voice cracking. Where are we supposed to go? William didn't hesitate. Anywhere that isn't ours. Camilla's gloves creaked as she clenched her hands. Charles will never approve this. William looked at her, unflinching. He already has. For a moment, nothing moved. The chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the building's old heating system and the distant sound of traffic outside. Then Rowan stepped forward, lifting the crate and transfer documents into the custody of the Royal Archives team, now waiting just outside. Every item would be logged, scanned and resealed under new control. Anne stood. This tribunal is closed. Guards approached Camilla and Thomas, not with handcuffs or aggression, but with silent finality, a gesture of transition, not arrest. William turned to Rowan as they began to leave the room. History remembers the wrong people far too often. Thank you for making sure she wasn't one of them. Rowan nodded once, no salute, no reply. Because what he'd done wasn't about loyalty to protocol. It was about keeping a promise to someone who never asked for one, but always deserved it. Camilla hesitated at the threshold of the chamber, her silhouette outlined against the open doorway. The guards waiting beyond didn't raise their hands or issue commands. They didn't need to. The sentence had already been carried out. She turned her head slowly, eyes scanning the room one last time. Past the tribunal table, past the sealed crate holding the locket, the diary, the mourning ring. Her gaze landed on Rowan. You think this makes you noble? She asked. The words weren't angry. They weren't pleading, just hollow, dry. Rowan met her eyes without flinching. No, ma'am, he said, just faithful. It hung there between them, not defiance, not triumph, just truth. The kind that didn't need raised voices or pulled rank, the kind that didn't apologize. She didn't respond. Her chin lifted a fraction, and she walked. Thomas followed behind her, shoulders slumped, expression vacant. Whatever fire he'd kindled with secrecy and auctions had been extinguished. He didn't even glance at the sealed crate as he passed. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Silence returned. William stood near the table, looking down at the mourning ring resting atop the velvet. He reached out, brushed his thumb across the surface, and stared at the engraving beneath his breath. Philip, ever E. He didn't speak to the room, just to Rowan, quiet, direct. She trusted the right people. Rowan gave a slight nod, nothing more. Then, with precise care, he picked up the ring, returned it to its velvet slot, and sealed the lid. One turn of the latch, one press of the brass clasp. Final. Not a burial, a restoration. The monarchy's oldest truths, protected not by titles, but by the people who remembered why they mattered. Was the royal guard right to go undercover and expose the Queen Consort's betrayal? Should exile have been enough, or should there have been public justice? And if you were in Rowan's place, would you have risked everything to protect the late Queen's legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on so you never miss the stories they wish would stay buried. Share this with someone who still remembers Queen Elizabeth's grace. And we'll see you tomorrow, same time with a brand new video. Watch the next story now on your screen.